Dude, this mix is excellent. It's been a long time since I actually rock and rolled to a mix from a modern band, rock band that actually sounded like this. Hello there, welcome back to the channel. Today we're gonna be reacting to the recently released track by the time of this video being released, of course, track by Ghost. The name in question, the track in question is Lachryma from the album Skeletá that it's about to be released again by the moment of this video dropping on YouTube. And I gotta tell you that Ghost is a band that I happen to like, but I am far from a fan of them because for me they're kind of a hit and miss band, not because they suck, it's because their style is not necessarily my jam at its fullest. And there are some tracks that I have heard and listened from them that I love. They're fantastic, but some of them are like, what the hell is going on with these guys? Could this be the case? Let's find out. But before we go, if this is your jam, I welcome you because in here we analyze the music that we love from the perspective of an active musician and professional music producer in a way to expand our knowledge when it comes to music production, songwriting, and of course music appreciation. So, now that it's been said, let's get into it. Here we go. Let's rock and roll. So here we go. Lachryma by Ghost. Okay, that was badass. I gotta admit that even though I'm not the biggest fan of this band, this track is already ticking all of the right boxes. Gotta say that I admit that the sound of the guitar is also fantastic. Loved it. As soon as the guitar kicked in, I couldn't be more happy, or you just saw me smiling. The sound of the guitar is very, very thick. How can I describe it? It has plenty of uh, kind of ballsiness to it. It's heavy, but it's defined. It's a little bit more on the mid-range focused. Of course, guitars tends to be when it comes to frequency spectrum, frequency range. Electric guitars tends to be on the mid-range. Let me explain a bit more. When you are dealing with music or sound in general, you got a set amount of frequencies that we can hear as human beings. The lowest we can hear is 20 hertz, all the way up to 20,000 hertz, and it's divided in mids, treble, and lows. Okay, bass. And guitars tends to live in the mid section. And interestingly enough, most of what we can hear as human beings lives in that area. What I'm trying to say with this is that the guitars are not that bass driven. They are not that deep sounding, and still they have balls. They have this presence. They have this power. And also, I love how well spread out they are across the stereo spectrum. I'm gonna elaborate more on those details a little bit later once we hit the analysis of the mix. But the first impression is that great guitar sound, but also the sound of the drums is freaking awesome. Love the power, love the punchiness, love the performance. I particularly love the sound of the snare because it has this kind of reminds me quite a lot of Metallica from the Black Album era. It has that particularly super attacky, super punchy, and super piercing, but cut through the mix, if that makes better sense to you. Sound that it's so cool. And the vocals are fantastic. I gotta admit as well that I don't happen to be that big fan of the sound of his vocals. He's a good singer, don't get me wrong, but it's not necessarily my style. But he's excelling in this one. It's very, very cool, very well harmonized. The harmonies during the chorus were fantastic, very, very amazing. And also, his voice has plenty of effects. Pay attention once I press play again to the sound of this effect in his vocals, particularly during the spaces in between phrases. You're gonna hear something called delay, and it sounds like this: delay. As you can hear, it's creating repetitions of my voice. And the way that it's been done on his vocals is to add a little bit of extra dimension and a little bit of eeriness, if that makes sense to you, because the sound of the band kind of has this spooky element to it. The theatrics are all about them being ghouls, nameless ghouls, if I remember correctly, and all of this kind of demonic or kind of ghoul-like aesthetic. And it's also reflected on the sound of the music and the mix in particular. So pay attention to that effect, and also this is something that you will find on both the snare and the vocals. It's called reverb, and it sounds like this: reverb. Okay, as you can tell, it's creating this kind of reverberation. Totally not intended. Well, that's actually the reason why the name is such. It's creating this extra tail end to the sound of the snare and the vocals in particular that creates this ambience. But you'll see that the snare has plenty of it, and it's kind of colorful in sound. By colorful, I mean it has texture. And the one it used in his vocals, it's also very, very musical. It's an example of when on how to use this particular tool to create or something other than ambience. It's actually adding this texture to the sound of the music. Let's continue because the track is badass. Actually, here we go. Dude, this mix is excellent. It's been a long time since I actually rock and rolled to a mix from a modern band, rock band, that actually sounded like this. It feels open, it feels punchy, it's not super loud, it has plenty of dynamic range, more on that later. I love the distribution of the instruments. Great. Please tell me the name of the mixing engineer for this one because this is actually good. Now, did you catch the effect that I was trying to point at the beginning of this analysis on the vocals? It's very, very obvious, right? The delay and the reverb, but it's used in such a great taste. Now, the guitar solo was great. I gotta admit that it's super cool. I love it because it had that particular first section that sounds a little bit similar to Queen, reminds me quite a lot of Queen, with this kind of baroque element to it. But then it morphed into a much more rock and roll oriented sound, which was excellent. Kind of glam rock, a little bit reminding me of Cinderella and all of those bands. Well done. And Again, the sound of the snare, it's super, super reminiscent to that sound from Metallica. So good. Now, let's talk about the mix even more, because it's time to hit the stage. It's time to hit the screen. So in front of us, we got Decibel, the tool that we use to analyze music through the use of a visual medium. Over here, we got the first section, which is the frequency range analyzer, which is what it's gonna show us through the use of this white line, how each of the different frequencies that comprises the human hearing range behaved, or how loud they were throughout the performance of the track. And you can see here that we got plenty of low end, but it's not insane. It's rich, and it's actually rounded, if that makes sense to you. And one thing that I forgot to tell you, this is 20, the lowest we can hear, all the way up to 20,000, the highest we can hear, okay? So this is the treble, this is the bass, and this is the mids, okay? And you can see here that we got a good amount of low end, and it's very well represented. And that's the reason why the sound of the guitars are a little bit scooped, not scooped, like kind of not that bass driven, because of how loud the kick and the bass are in the mix, and they fill in the gaps that the guitars are not necessarily projecting to you. That's very important, particularly for those of you who are guitar players. When you're nailing your tone, you gotta understand that you're gonna be playing alongside a bass and a kick drum. Those guys are already covering most of the low end, this area over here. Your guitar is capable of reaching plenty of this area as well, the mid lows and the lows. And if you add plenty of bass to the sound of your guitar, you're gonna masquerade and get in the way of the other two guys, the ones that actually are the driving force behind the low end of your track. And this mix is fantastic in that regard, because the guitars are so well crafted, and you notice that they are on the sides, they are stereo. The guitars are so well crafted, and so the tone is so proper for the track. It's not my tone, it's not the tone that I would use for myself as a guitar player myself, but it works in this mix and it works for this band, so it's excellent. And you see that by having these the guitars getting out of the way of the bass and the kick, you get a punchy mix, super intense, super energetic, bombastic, and uplifting to a certain degree. Then you see the rest, nice, beautiful tail end for the high end. It's not piercing. It's kind of pleasant to hear. It's not annoying. It's not that shrieky, if that makes sense, shouty. And you get a proper mid-range that shows no actual areas of excitement or overhype, because the mix is actually quite controlled and balanced. Look, you don't need a mix to be balanced for it to be perfect. You need a mix that makes sense for the track that you're working on. And in this case, this track has plenty of energy, but it's a very consistent. You see that there is not that many changes when it comes to the rhythm or the intensity, because most of the changes that takes place in the track, and it's something that I gotta remark as well, is the modulations, the changes in the harmony of the track are beautiful, very well done, extremely intelligent mix and composition, very good. Now let's take a look at the final section of the analyzer. This over here is what is known as the dynamic range analyzer, and this tool is what allows us to monitor and see how the sound has been projected to us in the basis of how loud it was throughout time. This blue block represents the loudness, and the higher it goes, the louder it was. Okay, why is that important? Because when you are listening to music, particularly recorded music, the more you crank up the volume, you will feel and you will get more excited. The music becomes more impactful and interesting, dynamic. But in contrast, when you listen to something that is quieter, it becomes much more mysterious, personal, and sexy to a certain degree. And in here, this is a good showcase of how to produce a track that is kind of loud and not dynamically speaking that different, but consistent and actually taking advantage of the different intensity levels. Because introduction, it was very kind of eerie, spooky to a certain degree, and then when the guitar kicks in, it's clearly here, and this is when the rest of the band joins. See how loud it went. Huge change, huge. And it kept going because there is not that many changes in the intensity of the track, all the way down to the next section. Basically more of the same, but this is the chorus, clearly. How do I know? It's louder. The thing is that when you are mixing music, if you push the faders during certain points, these are the faders, if you push them to make the sound louder of a certain instrument or the mix itself, you can make that section kick harder to be much more impactful, much more interesting, and much more sing-alongy, if that makes sense to you. And this being super sing-alongy makes total sense. Then we got this area over here, which is basically our guitar solo, and this is the first section where the Queen-like pattern took place. Very cool. Gotta remind you. And also, this is the main guitar solo. You can see that we got a ramp up in bottom here. It's light. It's very tiny, but this is where the money is gonna be found. The devil is in the details. It's not about making it obvious to you, because I can assure you that if I didn't tell you, you wouldn't even be able to notice the difference in volume. And that happens even to me. That's why I need an analyzer such as this one, because you learn a lot on how to make great sounding music by studying it like this. Let's finish off this track because I gotta tell you, this is freaking good. Here we go. That was excellent. That was excellent. This is a very good track. Ghost, as I said during the introduction to this video, it's a band that I not necessarily consider myself a fan of, but they have great songs that I love. This is one of them. It's very refreshing to see a band adopting many of the aesthetics from the 80s that worked and are clearly designed to sell, because Ghost is popular for many good reasons. They are good musicians, I gotta admit. You see the sound, they are fantastic, and some of the guitar parts were actually very technical, and also the whole performance of everything, the arrangements are not your a traditional Nickelback. That's what I'm trying to say. This sounds like a proper band. It sounds like a band that has put effort learning music theory, studying their instruments, and it shows. It's a great band. It's not necessarily my jam, but this track is fantastic. I would say that what I love the most about it is the mix, because it sounds so good, and it sounds so. I enjoy the mix, and it's something that is rare for me to do when it comes to modern bands, because usually they are so keen on pursuing that cookie cutter, tried and true, overly produced sound that it's quite common with bands from the late mid 2000s to late 2000s to late to early 2010s. Okay, that particular tone, and you find it in many bands in metal and rock. It's a tone, it's a sound that it's tiresome, to be frank. And these guys, the aesthetics, maybe because they have this kind of retro thing going on around them, plus the spooky element, they go for something a little bit more organic, and it shows. You see, I'm no, I'm far from speechless. I'm actually happy. I enjoyed what I heard. This is the second time I listened to this track. The first time I listened to it was because the video got released, and they tend to have very cool visuals. And it's kind of my jam. I'm kind of an extrovert as well, so I decided to give them a try because sometimes they have surprised me before. This is one of those moments. Excellent. Gotta tell you, great song. Totally recommend it, and the mix is fantastic. So, if you like to share your thoughts regarding the band, please let me know. And if you happen to be a bigger fan of Ghost, show me more songs like this. I know that their music tends to sound like this, and I'm not necessarily that big of a tourist. I kind of know my Ghost, but since I don't spend that much time listening to them, there are some hidden gems that I have just looked over because I'm that kind of guy. So if you happen to be a bigger fan of the band, please let me know and show the way. Show me more songs like this. Yeah, well, if you want to support the channel, the best way to do it is by listening to our music, which kind of has a similarity to Ghost, I gotta say. Not as much, we are more on the prog side, but you might find you might like it. If you enjoy Ghost, there's a big chance that you will like it. So you can do that by following us on social media such as Instagram and X, because that's the best way for you to get in touch with us on a much more personal basis. Now, the only thing left to be reminded is that you should never let anybody tell you what to dream about, and remember that I will see you when I see you.